Secondly, that I should keep in mind that this event has damaged or misconstrued somebody's identity,
Okay.
and I need to help them get that back.
Okay. So you wrote about the value of one particular question. What experiences have you ever had in your life history that have proved useful to you at this time? And I'm wondering about how you arrived at that question and why it was so valuable.
I'm not quite sure how I arrived at it, but it's valuable in that people often have their sense, good or otherwise, that they should just know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And they should just know how to behave, know what to do. And I don't know how they can do that. So I'm interested in asking them how they got to know what to do and how to behave and how to react. Does that answer your question?
It does. You asked a question to follow that up. Tell me some examples from your life that would illustrate this for me so that I could better understand what you were saying. And yes. I was thinking about that and wondering about your intentions in asking that question. Like I was struck by several things. One was the respectfulness. One was your stance towards knowledge, and one was about assuming some kind of agency.
I read a book called Mr. Pip.
Oh, yeah.
And in it, Hugh Laurie, the British comedian, in the movie, just talks about how he doesn't know how to be a teacher.
Oh, yeah.
So he gets lots of local knowledge. And he gets parents, women and fathers, to give their experience and pass it on. And so I'm looking for experiences people might have had that they didn't realize that may have turned out to be useful.
Mm-hmm.
And that in doing so, they are locating themselves as having a knowledge worthwhile.
That's a different kind of knowledge than academic knowledge, right?
Yes. It's experience knowledge.
Experience knowledge, okay. You spoke about this man, one man that you particularly asked these questions to in the article, and you talked about him having a large heart. Is it typical, I wondered about your work, that it engages people in reflection on things like that, rather than getting them to retell the story of the trauma?
Yes. And often, if it's children I'm working with, I access them in talking about the questions they would like the person to ask the person who created the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And try to set up ways for them to have the questions accessing that person. Not them themselves, but the questions accessing. And whether they do or not doesn't matter, but it brings them and their knowledge back into the picture again.
Can you speak about the danger of re-traumatizing?
Sorry? The danger of
re-traumatizing?
No, because I don't ask them about what happened. I don't need to know.
You don't need to know. Yeah.
No. I just ask them to talk amongst themselves and maybe write questions that they would like to have asked of the person who created the trauma.
Okay. When you say the
once
person who created the trauma, what do you mean? Sorry, Wally.
Well, yeah. I once met a man who was in a bank as a customer when a bank hold-up took place.
Yes.
And he went home and he told his wife and his young son. And his young son said the next week, "Can I come to the bank with you, Dad?" And he said, "Oh, I suppose so." So he went to the bank, and the boy questioned his father about where he stood and where the gunman stood. And then he said to his father, "If I'd have been here, it would have been different."
Yeah.
And his father said, "How come?" Well, he said, "I'd have gone over to him and kicked him in the nuts." And it's as though for the boy, well, there was no trauma.
Right.
And it realigned everything that was happening.
What did that do for the father?
Yes, the event didn't define the father.
It didn't define him.
The event was
Sorry, I lost you there.
The event was something that happened.
Okay.
The father was just the same person as he ever was.
You talk about asking questions that connect a person with his or her narrative resources. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, I think in the article you're referring to, I was writing about a man I had met who came from one of the Pacific Islands.
Yes.
And he said, as he grew up, he got angry with his grandmother. And to escape her, he climbed up a coconut palm.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to the top. And it bent right over and broke.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And he broke his leg. When he hit the ground, he broke his leg. And he thought to himself then, what I should have learned was to listen to my grandmother. And that came forward in thinking about the trauma.
Okay.
That he learned to listen to others.
Okay.
And when he did, he made good choices.
And
so he listened to, in this case, somebody dropped dead at an event he was at. And he was a security guard. And he cried for days because his heart was so big in going after this person. And he recalled that he didn't think of himself. He just thought of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was younger, he thought only of himself. If he had thought about what his grandmother was saying, it could have been different.
Mm-hmm.
So he incorporated the past in the present.
Yes.
He learned from this past to be thoughtful of others and do what his grandmother had been saying to him, you need to be thoughtful. And he said, nah, I don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm. You talked about, in your article, you talked about the difference between personal knowledge and professional knowledge. And I'm wondering why you think personal knowledge is more important in the context of critical incident work.
Because personal knowledge is him or whoever it is.
Yeah.
Professional knowledge is mine, and I wasn't there.
Right, yes, okay.
So that person or persons was. Earlier this year, I was called to about 100k away to a place where 4 children had been in the house, and the gunman had shot up the house, and there were bullets in the TV set and the walls, and the father tried to make off with the children in the car, and there were bullet holes in the car, and the kids were quite excited because this was like TV.
Yeah.
But they were also traumatized a little by how close it was that they could have been killed.
Yes.
And I think that the event traumatized them and changed them from who they were an hour beforehand to who they became an hour after.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to re-establish their identity of who they were an hour before. So with them, it was like, so would you like to ask the gunman how he got to think shooting at a bunch of kids was a good idea?
Yeah.
Yes, they said. Yes. So we talked on about what they would like to ask the gunman.
Mm-hmm.
Not what happened, but what they would like to ask. So in that way, I was re-establishing their identity.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm conscious of Michael White saying there is always a response. And I'm wondering how important that is in your critical incident work.
Yes. There's always a response, and often it goes unnoticed, especially by the people responding.
Especially by professionals?
Yes, but even like in this case, by these kids,
Yes.
it was just scary. They didn't notice.
That they had a response.
So that they had a response, and they had some responses to what would you like? What would you say to him if you saw it? Because kids can do that.
Yes. You also spoke about the importance of the landscape of action and the landscape of consciousness in your article to your work, and I'm wondering if you can speak about that.
I think that applies more to adults in terms of being clear.
Okay.
Kids just and often they think and act.
Yes.
Things to start. So for adults, it's about, so I did do that, and I did do that. Yes. And whereas that's a bit beyond kids.
Yes. Okay. So speak about it in relation to adults then. Why would you think it's important to do that? Focus on those things.
I think because adults think they haven't done anything.
Yes.
And I think they have.
Right. Is that about agency?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
They have done something?
Because they do whatever they can under the circumstances.
Right. In the bank robbery story, you were careful to ask a series of identity stories. Then you said the story of identity you were looking for ran counter to the story of a person as hopeless or incompetent or inadequate or inept. Can you speak about what you were intending to do when you did that?
I don't think that, I think it's a way of thinking about things. I don't think I